Hey, Ray, Michael, Eduardo, Todd. Let's give the others a little bit more time to join.
Hi, Hannes.
Hey,
Just my microphone.
So
it's
last
it was.
I and then it showed up at 11, and I'm a bit confused.
You're confused about what?
Well, I was sure the upcoming calendar had this meeting at 9 a.m. Eastern. Maybe until Friday. It even said that. Is that possible that it got changed?
Yeah. The reason why it got changed was it's actually a longer story. We
But
initially
it did get changed. I'm not crazy.
No. It got changed. Yeah, but the short story is we tried to find a suitable slot for everyone. Not everyone paid attention, and then when I announced the selected or preferred date, people woke up and said, "No, that's not what we want."
Right. Okay. But it did change. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if that's more or less convenient for you, but yeah.
It's less convenient. This thought is less convenient for me. But I was more concerned that I had screwed up my calendar
Okay.
because there were some problems with the time zones with the upcoming calendar in early April. And if you're using Google Calendar, it has not caught up. It still has not fixed all of its places. So
Really? Okay.
that's and that's a Google Calendar bug that unfortunately, yeah.
That happens. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we have a small group today, but doesn't matter. So welcome anyway to this next virtual intro meeting for the SCITT working group. As usual, official intro meeting recordings are being made. All the IETF rules apply, IPR rules, etc. Last week we talked about the registration policies, and this week, as I distributed in the meeting invite, in the updated meeting invite, we want to also take a look at the open issues and maybe make some progress on those, or we can also look at the PRs, which there are only currently 3 PRs, but there are a long list of open issues, unfortunately. I see. John, do you want to add something to this?
Hi, yes, thanks, Hannah. So one bit of agenda hacking just arose from email list this week is a quick discussion about anybody here who knows the Key Trends group, currently Birds of a Feather, but they're going for chartering. And it looks to me like the Key Transparency folks really just want to be a use case on top of SCITT. And if they're not, then it looks to me like we really need to make sure that the primitives are aligned, because it's really darn similar. So yeah, quick chat about that, because their charter is in the discussion phase right now.
Yeah, thanks. That's a very good point.
I'm having a little trouble hearing John. Maybe John can talk more loudly next time. Thanks.
Yeah, bump up the volume, John. Okay. Steve, good to see you back.
Hey, folks. Good to be back. I heard pump up the volume, and I don't know, I immediately jumped to songs.
Steve, do you have any issues that you would like to? I know you've been on vacation and so on, so probably you haven't spent a tremendous amount with SCITT, but maybe there's something, because you created a number of the open issues as well, or at least try to make. Or actually, you did create many open issues.
I mean, I just I did the copy paste authoring of them, so they're not. But I'm clicking through the PR requests and the issues now, I guess it's hard for me to have an opinion because I don't know what's transpired over the last couple of weeks. I had literally just got in late last night. So I see the Merkle tree proofs issue 45 and issues. I mean, we could certainly triage the items in there, including the ones if they're so old, that the stuff that we copied over from the work that Hank had done, that if there's no activity on them, we could close them. We wanted to make sure we were capturing people's opinions and the issue in the PR that we were closing. And if there's no activity on it, we can close and ask if folks still have an opinion on it, they can reactivate it.
Yeah, for sure. There's one very new open issue which Cedric created. So that's
the URLs for transparent statements.
Yeah. Actually, I should note this in the meeting minutes. I'm also typing meeting minutes while. Yeah. Cedric, since we are looking at these open issues, obviously yours is the most recent one. Do you want to say something about this specific open issues, URLs for transparent statements?
Yes, thanks. Yes, so it's something we discussed in many places, at least in, I think.
Do you want to share your screen or to show the issue because you added a lot of text?
Yes, how do I do that? Let me try.
Yeah, it's the not the sort of like the join icon, but then there's the preloaded slides which you don't have, but then there's the share screen icon on a icon bar below your name. That's where you.
Okay, thanks.
Not a problem. Yeah.
So which screen do you see?
And now we can't see any screen.
So, okay, I have 3 screens and I'm not sure which one is shared, but okay, it's probably need to be approved by someone. It's just still a request on my side.
Okay.
Are we just looking at the issue screen? If so,
Yes.
it's there's a URL for it, obviously.
Yeah, we I see there's an attempt to share the screen is it started, but it I don't know, it doesn't show up yet. Maybe it takes a little bit more time.
Okay, that's this one, yes.
It should be okay. Yes,
Okay,
now
yes,
it's
okay.
it
Thanks,
just took longer.
Okay, I'll get better at this, yes. So it's something we discussed at many places and at the hackathon, at the meetings, and it should be relatively simple, but in fact, the details are not that simple when you look at them. So the purpose is to find, to identify what is the standard way to refer to previously registered statement. And that's something that's important for many reasons, but in particular, it's very important for registration policies as soon as you have multi-statement policies. And it's also very important for federation as soon as you have multiple transparency services that are quoting one another. So please have a look at the notes. So I stated some use case, some goals, some proposed syntax, which consists of a locator together with a commitment. So what I think are the interesting issues and things that where we really need some feedback and some consensus is on the discoverability aspect and on the locator aspect. So one view is to say that discoverability is out of scope of a reference, in which case just the opaque digest is good enough. And from the hash, it's content-based. So you can have an index somewhere else that actually retrieves the transparent statement based on the hash, no matter where it is stored. the current design is more explicit about the identity of the transparency service, in the sense that this is the official locator where that was registered and where you may be able to query it if need be. The difficulty and the controversy is that we don't want to require that the transparency service be able to forever answer read queries from arbitrary parties. So in some cases that will be required, in some cases that will be too expensive or limited to 6 months or 2 years or something like that. And so the concern with that design is that people might interpret the locator as a promise that the TS will keep the transparency statement available at that URL. And again, it's ideal when it happens. It's not something you want to strongly guarantee.
Cedric, there are several people in the queue in case you
okay, sorry, yes, maybe it's a good time to stop and let others ask questions, yes.
Yep, exactly. Dick, you're the first one.
Thank you, Hannes. Yeah, this is an issue we also experience with our own SAG center, where you have a single SHA-256 hash value, but there are different types of statements or declarations that may be posted into the registry. And so we ended up creating essentially what's called a declaration type. And that may be what you're referring to here, Cedric, is the need to have a different type, identify different types of statements for the same exact object identified by a SHA-256 hash value. Am I understanding your concerns correctly?
So, okay, I'm not completely sure. So there is a need to be able to query the transparency service or the statements registered at the transparency service. And for that, you may have a more advanced query language that says, I want to know what is the latest query from that issuer for that purpose, for example. So here, the goal is not to provide the syntax for querying the transparency service in general, but more to identify specifically one previously registered claim and just that claim. And so that's why in that case, the digest is in principle good enough. It's not meant to be an interface for querying the particular transparency statement I'm interested in. It's meant to be a mechanism to authenticate and designate one specific transparent register statement at that TS. So in a sense, you are correct, but the purpose of this is more limited. It's really identifying a registered transparent statement rather than querying for a statement in a richer, more database style. Does it make sense?
I think this is where the registration policies have to play a role in defining which type of statements are available or accessible in a registry. So I think I'm in agreement with what I think you're doing. Thanks.
Cedric, I'm next. Cool.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate a little bit on beyond sort of like obviously the compactness of using a reference instead of the full-blown receipt or the transparent statements? What is the use case in the federation, as you were saying?
Okay, so one argument is being compact, but it's not just it. So if I replicate the transparent statement everywhere, then in some advanced attacks, maybe that's a transparent statement that was not actually registered, or maybe the transparency service is corrupt and is inconsistent. And so even if you forget about compactness in terms of security, being able to refer through a commitment to a shared transparent statement is arguably more transparent and more secure. So there is that transparent sharing that is important. I think it's also for how to say that. No, yeah, let's stay there. I think you can in many cases put the full transparent statement. I think because it may be recursive, and that transparent statement may itself have references. You really don't want to unfold a full tree of transparent claims. A good example: assume you want to use a reference in a statement. In the statement that you are replacing. So you have an issuer and you have a feed and you have a statement and you want to say, this is the new statement for my firmware. And this is replacing this particular statement in the line. Then in that case, you, including it verbatim would I think defeat the purpose, because you want to refer to something that is registered as a position in the ledger, not to it as a value. And if you were doing it by value, then you need to recall the full history of all the firmwares you have released in the past, right?
Okay, thank you. Henk, you are next.
Yeah, hi everybody. Sorry for being late. I'm in a weird place in Orlando right now that has curious Wi-Fi and curious doors. And so if you scroll down here, and I think Cedric already said something different. If you scroll down here, Cedric, on this page, on this issue, and F5 this page, you'll see a comment that I prepared an hour ago, but only pressed send when I was arriving in my room. So if you scroll down, yeah, oh, it's already there. Yeah, wonderful. It's auto-updating. Wonderful. So I thought when I read this, what you wrote here, that we have normative text about that in the architecture. I'm not going into the depths if we should use normative language, but it says in the architecture that payload content may be encrypted or opaque, which in essence means that a transparent survey is basically never required to understand it, but it must understand its metadata, which goes into the COSI header, for example. So having said that, if you are not putting the actual payload, say a cat video, into the store, but a reference to it with a locator, to me, that sounds that it must, if you use a structure that should make it transparent, so it's non-opaque, using the language here, it's non-opaque, then it must be well defined. I wrote well known here because I was really fast. But I assume that we need a standardized statement structure that is deliberately well defined, not well known, but also well known, I guess, that points you to the correct location. And I think we can't say, yeah, well, some of these referrals are proprietary and you have to know how they work. Okay, but we also need a standard way to say what Dick just said, that's the content type, or is you called it something different, but basically you're saying you don't have to understand the type you were looking at least you know what the semantics are to some extent, and then where to find it, how to resolve it, how to retrieve it, maybe. So with the scheme and authority and whatever. And so thank you, Joel. And so my assumption, again, to long story short, to me it sounds like this is a few of the statements that we can define actually as a CBOS structure. Isn't that correct?
I think I think there is short answer. I'm not sure. In particular, I think you really your comment seems to be assuming that we are talking about the payload of the statement, and that's not at all what I'm trying to do there. So you can have references to many things, including to the payload if you want to do detached envelope and kind of things. But that's not what's happening here. What you are referring to here is to a full-fledged transparent statement, including the statement inside its envelope that makes it a signed statement, and including the receipt that makes it transparent. So it's the full signed, registered, and transparent statement, not just the payload.
Thank you. That is me just not reading this intense enough, but trying to comment on it early. So okay.
Just to elaborate on that, so those references may occur in the payload, in which case, of course, the transparency service will ignore them, but still the issuer and the verifier need to agree on the contents. So it may make sense inside of the payload to have, instead of an opaque payload, to have references to other statements.
Yeah.
The main use case where the transparency service will be at play is if we include references to transparent statements in headers, in particular to refer to a policy or to refer on a transparent statement you are replacing, for example, or to some transparent statement to one of the parts we are building on, these kind of things. And so the use case, I think, will be for those being included in headers. But again, as it is written, the reference could go in a policy, in the payload, in the headers, anywhere. We don't want to say where they go, just what they consist of.
Okay. Sorry for the detour then. To just reflect this back real quick, I think the DID web portion is actually nice because you have the identification of the transparent statement and potentially can resolve that into getting it, which let's the second point is the discovery. So yeah, why not? So especially, and you're correct, if that would include the receipt, you can now use this reference here in another tree that might have different algorithm layouts.
Yeah.
And still will be able to make use of the statements stored somewhere else. And I think that's an excellent choice. Yeah, and this can go anywhere, even to the header. Yeah. Okay, got it.
Yes, I agree. But to be fair, several people, including Roy and some of our engineers here, complained that assuming that the transparency service will be able to resolve this kind of references forever is very dangerous and is misleading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you do not, so if you're making statements about an artifact that, about a, I want to say artifact right now, what we're saying, a product, object, whatever, the thing that you're talking about in the supply chain, the software effectively in our case, if that is stored somewhere else because it already exists for 20 years and you're now in hindsight documenting things with SCITT, and then from that point on start to use it as a live current feed, so to speak, then you pretty much would be obligated to fetch all that from the internet or from other authority or the source, and that does not make always sense. Also, size and scalability and usefulness, right? So I think we need to deal with verification processes that say, oh, and by the way, on my regular, I don't know, self-audit check, I am unable to resolve this anymore. And maybe there could be, I don't know, maintenance processes that indicate that these statements are now, I don't know, stale to some extent. I don't know how that would work, but is that a route forward that there would be, I don't know, intervals of self-verification that the verifier checks all this again? This is, of course, hard work and it takes a lot of effort, but would that be a way to some extent prune these statements that are not available anymore, but were true at some point?
So all of that can be done on the side, but I don't think we would try to standardize a mechanism to say what is.
Okay. So whatever it is. Okay.
The main scenario that really frightened some of the implementers was to say, assume there is a transparency service that maintains statements for 3 months, and I have an issuer that needs to be available for 5 years. Then the issuer will really like to point the verifier to a store that is going to keep the statement for 5 years, as opposed to the original transparency service. And we don't have yet a way to do that. I think that can be done by putting auxiliary locators and as untrusted information elsewhere in the envelope. But if we do that, then we need to agree that this stays outside of this particular part of the.
So just sorry for just another paper question, but this would fall in the registration policy bucket then. So because we have to define who is carrying the duty, who is burdened with the duty of checking that. And here now the issuer is. The verifier just notarizes it, records it, puts it into the append-only log, right? So the responsibility to take care of it there for 5 years is on the issuer side, you say?
Yes, okay, of course I'm making that up, but yes, that would be an example. I believe that, in fact, it's a very good point. The fact that some references may be interpreted by some registration policies, I think that's going to be really dependent on which header the reference is included. For example, if there is a header that says persist for 5 years, and then the transparency service accepts it, then of course it will need to maintain it in the future. But that will be the semantic of a specific header in the registration information. I don't think that will be attached to the semantics of the reference itself.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for going into the details here. I'm set up now.
Thanks.
Okay, Charlie, you're next.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, Cedric, this is interesting. I guess my question, primary question is this a proposal for the methodology by which to build the data structure, or is it a proposal for an option that could be used within that data structure? In other words, is this the idea that we would have references to transparent statements as the default and supported version, or is this one method?
So it's meant to be the recommended interoperable method for referring to a transparent statement. And
Okay.
I'm anticipating a couple of places where we will need in this architecture to agree on that format. And one of them is a federation, when you have multiple transparency services that refer to one another. Another will be some advanced registration policy where you need the transparency service to interpret what the reference means and to check its resolution. Yeah. So I think it's meant to be generally useful. If other people want to refer to claims to statement in other way, that's completely fine. But there will be places where we need multiple of the parties in our architecture to use the same format for references, and that's meant to be for them. So in short, that needs to be in the architecture document.
Yeah, so I guess I disagree with that because while we're talking about internet and replacing certificates and things like that, that works perfectly fine. However, in if you look at, for example, I'm trying to think of something else that would be useful here. Art, maybe, right? So somebody authenticates a work of art, and that goes into a supply chain of some kind. And that happened in 1850, and that where's the URL of the transparent statement there? There has to be an option to maintain everything, and also Ray's got his hand up as well. I bet he's going to talk about air gaps, and that's or at least that might be one thing he could talk about. That the methodology expressed here will not allow for an air gap system. You always have to be online, and I think that is a fundamental problem. When you're not dealing with software or internet, and you're dealing with steel or artwork or peaches. So that my statement is that, or I guess my position on this is that we need to have an alternative in which the contents of the authentication are present in the statement. And the compactness I do not see as a good argument for that, because compact does not necessarily equal better, in my opinion. It's not that much information in the payload to add the full transparent statement as attested by the authentication service.
Okay, thanks. So if I understand correctly, that's part of the discoverability. So you think discoverability in the air gap system or in many systems is going to be broken. What I was suggesting as a useful pattern for that is in that case that you will distribute the statement that refers to statement A that refers to statement B together with statement B, so that so you pass statement A and statement B, and A refers to B, and then locally everyone can check that the reference that B hashes to what is recorded as the hash of statement B hashes to the reference that is regarding statement.
But why not just include both? I mean, I guess.
But in that case, both are included, but both are included as flatly instead of one being nested in the other.
I'm sorry, I guess I didn't follow
that. So you
that.
include both, one of them having a reference to the other, And then you can locally check by rehashing the second statement that the reference is okay. So in a sense, it's as compact as if you are inlining the reference inside.
But why do we need compact? That's I guess my fundamental heartburn over this. Compact isn't necessarily all that great. If you want if you want a tool, and you know where the tool is, but you're not in that location, you're not going to be able to get the tool. And I think that these are not gigantic amounts of data in the attestation space. So I think they should be carried, or at least have an option to carry them in full.
But
with the data.
I agree, but I think that option is there. So in a sense, you can see that as a detachable embedded transparent statement. You can always pass the list, the set of transparent statements referring to one another.
Okay. Well, maybe I'm misinterpreting an earlier statement, which you said. I think you said this is the proposal for the data and how the data will be built. So if that's not the case, then I feel okay. But I do think there has to be a standalone option which has the full attestation built in with all the with all the right data, both to go off and re-authenticate if necessary, or to judge whether at some point in the past it was authentic enough.
Yeah, I think, and for that you have the transparent statement, and that's I'm assuming lots of users will keep the transparent statement verbatim, and that's a difficult thing to do. Now, I guess I was thinking also on what happens on the transparency service side. So what you put in the log. And I think in the log, putting statements that include full copies of other statements already in the log is where compactness seems wrong. In the extreme, if each statement has to include its all three of dependency of other statements, then you get very large statements. And also, to verify the log, you need to check the consistency of every nested statement against those that have been recorded in the past. So that's more verbose and less secure. So otherwise, if you have
you have
a full log, then you really want references and not a copy of the log inside of every entry in the log.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that I don't want to dominate the floor here, but there are differences between something. If I was a reputable organization in 1850, but today I'm not, then the reference isn't going to do you any good. So I think there's so anyway, I'll leave it at that. I'll let Ray take the floor and express his issues. But I think there's some concern.
But I was hoping that a reference together with the referee will be sufficient for that use case. The whole point is if you have a transparent statement, you can check that the reference. Okay, you don't need to ask a service, which would be really bad. You just react the full thing, right?
Yeah, I guess we've beaten that one. Ray is next in the queue.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I think that, okay, so one thing is I'm resolving a little bit more what the use case is for this election data situation. And the discoverability and the reference are going to be pretty important, I think, because this data is going to be developed incrementally. And so there's going to be an initial, say, a hunk of data, it's not very big, which is the list of all the public keys of the devices. And that needs to be, the transparency service is perfect for making that public and locking it down. But that has to be locked down earlier than, we get the data from those devices. Then later we get incremental data from some devices and not others, and then there's this central devices that are, and we would like to get that data incrementally, and then so we at the end we need to have a way to either as part of the SCITT functionality of the append-only log, or something that we'd have to add on ourselves that will allow us to get to all of the data and say, okay, for this particular, in this case, election at a certain district, what is all the data? Give me all the data for it. For a software use case, it's more like, give me all of the software, stuff, plus all the tests and the results, and from the testing agencies and stuff. And I need it all. And so there needs to be a way to, number one, have something that is outside of the obscure area, if you want to use it, and then a way to say, for the submitter maybe to say, I want to group all this together. Like maybe we can have a fairly simple SCITT, machine that doesn't know very much, but the users of it can know, okay, I've submitted all this stuff. It has these references, and I'm combining that all together finally into this one final submission, or at least incremental submission, and here it is. And so I'm saying my new claim is that these other submissions are all part of this larger thing. And if we do it that way, then we can kind of not have to worry about the discoverability and other things like that. We kind of put that on the shoulders of the users, where they would know what they've submitted, and they would say, okay, I've submitted this stuff to the registry, and here is my final statement as to or not final, but the current statement as to everything that's included. So if it's a software use case, you would say, okay, here's the binaries, here's the ports to XYZ, and then here's some of the testing data, and then I'm grouping that all together into this sort of meta submission, and it refers to the other submissions, so that people outside of the scope of that particular use case may not be able to find out like what it is that they're grouping together. There may be not too much exposed in the non-obscure part of it, and you would still be able to find that if you had the sort of meta submission concept. That's sort of my idea, but it's kind of important for us to be able to get to number one, have this SCITT registry be incrementally something we can incrementally submit to, have those all locked in, and then have some way of having a final submission that also refers to the incremental ones, because we want to be able to say, for example, that like back in time, at time X, we did submit this, and this is exactly what was submitted. We can't rely upon a new submission to say, okay, now I'm submitting a new, and by the way, I changed everything just so it complies with my new hacking scenario. So it would have to be able to refer to older entries. And so that's why I think the sort of meta entry can solve the discoverability and not provide too much of the obscurity. I hope maybe I've said enough about that idea. Okay, thanks.
So I think I understand your the use case. I think we are so the architecture is really centered on the transparency service, and so in particular, what we call a statement really is the unit of registration. So you describe providing incrementally data about what's happening, and so I think from the transparency service viewpoint, each time you register something and to make it transparent, it is a separate statement. And I think that's okay. In particular, it means the transparency service did not know about this meta-level grouping of statements. And I believe that fits your need, assuming that the user is okay to deal with collections of statements, of related statements for a given purpose, as opposed to a single statement. I think if you try to force everything or the summary or the conclusion of a protocol or of a vote or of a release on the supply chain to be a single statement that doesn't depend on anything else, then you have a problem, because the unit of registration and the unit of what needs to be stated for the users are quite different. But again, I'm hoping that as long as the user is okay to use to do the meta level on its own, to manage its own collections of related statements.
No, let me just interrupt.
Yes.
There's no, you can't allow corrections. So, okay, we know that in an append-only log, you can't correct something, but also we can't allow them to submit something new to correct something that was said in the past. It was said in the past, and that's what they said, and so they can't say, okay, well, this, this is the new data that without also referring to the older data and say this is what used to be. Maybe you could do it that way, but I'll tell you what, I think the discoverability, maybe like if you're someone outside and you want to say find all of the products that had this type of airbag, then you're going to need to somehow, I don't know how you would do that if you have obscure statements, unless you were able to somehow see into them a bit more and find that airbag or that, library of in the bombs, you would need to be able to find that. And so some of the functionality of looking in unless you somehow could, that's the part that I think is a problematic with having completely obscure submission statements. Then how do people actually find that library, that like who's using this library? We needed to find out what that would be a good challenge to it. I'll tell you what though, I'm getting closer to understanding what you're doing here and what my needs are in this, and I'll make a comment on this in written form. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, in fact, I just want to, as a commenter, I think using references when you want to replace or supersede a prior statement that you made is a very good use case. So if you have two statements signed by the same issuer for the same purpose, then you really don't know which one follows from the other. Now, if you have, if one of them explicitly refers to the other one, and you have both, then you can compare both, you can understand what the update was, and you really know very clearly, and you can convince everyone that you have the latest. So one of the registration policy will be replaces a header that will have a reference where we can probably argue define quite a specialized useful registration policy for checking that. And it's also a case where putting the full statement that you replace by value doesn't scale.
Okay, so let me give you an example within the software use case. Let's say we have a piece of software and we have, let's say it's something that's critical, like a self-driving car software that they have to submit and say, this is our self-driving car software and it was tested according to these criteria and here's the test results. And then later they had an update and they updated and fixed stuff, but some of the cars were still running on the old stuff. There was an accident, people died, so they're in court and they want to find out what version of the software and was it tested. So not only they need to go back and find out not the new stuff but the old stuff and what the test results were there. So we need to have, as you can see there, we need to have the full, like even the older results that they can't, we don't want them to be able to replace that and never or change it. They have to be able to go back to that, and we have to be able to say, okay, yeah, so they were. Can you prove in court that you had, this software at this level? And they would have to say, no, I can't. And this is what we want them to have to say. I can't because it was only tested to this according to the SCITT ledger because it locks in where my test results were. And that's comparable to what I need. So there would be a distributed set of things in the ledger, not distributed, I'm sorry, that's a bad name because it implies something else, but say a number of entries in the ledger that refer to the same product at different stages and different releases, but they all need to be kept there because of the different, levels of functionality and whether they've been tested and so forth. And so they can't replace each other, but now we need to find them. And so now we need to be able to say, okay, now for this product, so somewhere there needs to be a marker of, I think, that is not obscure for, and this is what I expressed in that Skyview, we need to know who the manufacturer is and what the product is, at least, so that we can track those things down. And maybe there's a thing where you can say, look, I don't want anyone to know anything going in, and so I don't want to use that metadata. But I think most of the time we'll say, okay, look, you're going to have to identify who you are, you're submitting this, and what your product is, so we can look things up later. And maybe, it'll have a time on it, so they can, but that would do a lot, the lion's share of what we need, those two items in an unobscured area. Okay, enough said from me. Thanks.
Thanks, Ray.
And I will follow up.
I'm next again.
I'll give it in written form. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Ray. Yeah, two issues. One is, and that's a sort of question to Cedric or request to Cedric to sort of fine tune the motivation. I think the compactness is it's an optimization, but it also obviously has some disadvantages, makes things more complicated, etc. But I hear that there are other use cases from the discussion so far. It's just the difficulties to draw the line between referencing and a query language. So there's a slippery slope here. That's the first point. The second issue is more a technical one. I believe the did web URI scheme here is not what you should be using for this purpose, because I would just use a URN and define how the discovery works, because the did web, at least that's my understanding of the specification, specifically refers to identifying a did rather than a statement. So you're actually looking at using or defining a different URI scheme, and that's not a big drama. It's just a different name, essentially. That's all from my side.
So I guess as long as it's something that we can compute from the full-fledged transparent statement, that's okay. If we think of it as an independent locator that is not authenticated, then that will be something different and substantially different.
No.
So it's meant to be the abstract identifier of where it was registered, not necessarily a locator, and that's part of the ambiguity of the proposal. I'm quite aware of it.
I can in the comments I can post a message on how I think it should be done. It's a small technical issue rather than sort of the earlier discussions were more on a use case and broader architectural scope rather than this one. So it's a small thing.
Thanks. Yes, please first summary of the discussions to help me converge on this issue. So yes, comments on the issue are most welcome. Who is next? Was it Henk or
no, it was Dick. Dick,
okay,
you are
Dick is on the line.
Okay. Thank you, Hannes. So one thing that concerns me is, the software supply chain can get very complex very quickly, and I think we're being a little bit too abstract in our discussions. I think we can flush out the core concepts of a transparency service using a very simple model based on something we can all relate to. And I'll give you a very quick example. So Hannes is going to be the transparency service that registers people's weights, or people information. And so I want to do a lookup. I want to say, I want to know the weight of Dick Brooks, and I need to get it from Hannes's registry transparency service. There's two things that come right off the bat. We need to know, we need to identify. We need to be able to identify the transparency service entity that we can query, and we need to know the subject that we want to submit the query on. So there you have two concepts that both apply to software as well. With regard to this whole concept of weight, weight is a great example, going back to what Hank was saying earlier about staleness and freshness. You know, if you record my weight from today, it's very different from my weight that was recorded, you know, in 1979 when I got married. So the concept of freshness and staleness would play out with this simple use case as well. So what I'm suggesting is maybe we can just start with something simple that we can all relate to as we try to flush out what this transparency service thing is and what it provides. And I think just using that weight example is a good one that we could easily, you know, flush out some key concepts from. Things like, you know, for example, in a weight is a unit of measure, right? So that's data that would have to be carried in the receipt. There's a timestamp of when that weight was recorded. You know, so there's all kinds of other information that would go into the statement in that one case. So, you know, even though the weight one is not germane to what we're trying to accomplish here, I think it would help us at least identify core concepts that we need to ensure exist within this transparency service. Thanks.
So so first of all, I agree that's something we need to do. I think that's out of scope in this particular issue. So as mentioned a few times, this is not meant to be a query language. And what you are, I think, informally asking for is what are the most natural queries, what may have about a statement. So this is just a way to identify and refer to one specific transparent statement. So back to your example, it provides me a way of referring independently to each of your successive weights registered at a particular transparency service. Not more, not less. And if you want to know what is to get the history or to get the latest, that's not the purpose of transparent statement. That will be something else. Yeah, so it's really meant to be one building tool to refer to specific transparency statements, and there are use cases for that. Many query examples will be outside the scope of what we are trying to do here.
Yeah, it's really a proposal to try and simplify this to something that we can all say, okay, here are the key concepts that we know we need to capture for any transparency service that's going to produce anything. But you know, if that's not going to work for people, then obviously that won't fly. So if it's not going to work, then I withdraw my suggestion. Thanks.
Thanks, Dick. Next one is Hank.
Yeah, hi there. So I would like to take up items from Charlie and Dick and about the historicity, a term that I recently learned like a year ago in the realm of remote attestation. The historicity of the information is important. Charlie said some of this historicity is not captured digitally, correct? Even the software, sometimes this is in a very weird format that we wouldn't call it digital, like an Excel sheet, I don't know. It's not post-processable effectively, and or weirdly formatted. And then we have this weight example from Dick, which is same, because Dick is recording this, I know, in his own Excel sheet again. So now we have SCITT, and now if you want to add a ancient software to the SCITT ledger and its historicity, there's an authority doing that is the issuer. So Charlie highlighted that this information is not really available on the internet, but well, someone issued the statement. So while that statement is issued by the issuer, now this issuer is responsible of vouching for the authenticity and the historicity of that statement made transparent by the service, I think. So wherever you do, even if it's hundreds of years old and about a painting, let's call it like ancient software that ran on floppy disks with air gap naturally built in because there was no network. I think that is something, burden the issuer with. So the issuer is doing all the provenance research, providing historicity, and then issuing that as statement, as the initial statement about the product or the object, and then we go from there, right? So I think it's fine as long as we burden the issuer with that responsibility of providing that data in statement format, of course, and then go from there. So I'm a little bit surprised that this is perceived as a problem, because now the issuer would be responsible to resolve that. Is that correct? Because Charlie is next in line. Maybe it's a good sequence here.
Okay.
I think so.
Charlie,
I
are
guess
you still in the queue, or is that October?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, I had my actually.
Charlie.
I should have put my hand down, but since I'm up, I'll just answer Hank's question.
Clever.
The concern I had was not so much with the issuer, but the availability of the internet to go off and look it up. That's my concern. I like the idea of a standalone set of data.
Okay.
Self-flowing.
Coming back to that really quick again, the issuer takes on the responsibility. If you don't trust the issuer and the transparency service, of course, the offline verifiable receipt won't help you. You have to put trust in the service as a trusted third party. I don't know, and the issuer doing their work correctly because they pass the registration policy of the transparency service. I mean, then at this point, you can believe that someone was at this point of making it transparent, at least providing it on the internet, maybe for 2 days. I don't know, but that should work, right?
Yeah, I guess we probably need to work through this. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's it's a very intriguing use case, I have to say. Yeah, I'm not married to it, but I just think that there's going to be once we get into other supply chains, in the middle of nowhere, if you're going to trust a load of steel, that becomes harder to authenticate the endorser, right? Things like that. So yeah. So I mean, I'm not objecting to having that available, but I also think that it would be useful in many cases to have the full data set available as well.
Okay.
I think that's super important. So let me check if we agree on this one. So to me, this proposal is really not assuming that you need to do a lookup in order to resolve a reference. So to me, the most common case will be that as a verifier, you receive two transparent statements, one referring to the other, and you recompute the hash of the second statement to check that it matches the one in the first statement, so that you know that the issuer of the first statement is really meant to refer to the second statement that you have at hand. And that does not involve going to the internet. That's something you can do on your own, or as soon as you have a copy either received or obtained from any other source of the second transparent claim. So transparent statement. So this is not at all assuming that discoverability will be required or enforced or necessary to check a reference. The easiest case is you have a transparent statement, you hash it, and then you check that it matches a reference in another transparent statement.
But that's only half of the story, Cedric, because in your write-up, you kind of assume that, for example, in this, what you show on the screen, ds.software.org is that there is that this is at some place, right? A transparent statement and on some transparency service somewhere on the internet at some point in time, right?
No, if I have the transparent statement 42 from this ts.software.org, I can recompute the digest from it, and I never need to check if that transparency service is still live.
Right, but if and maybe what we need to do is really, as Charlie and Ray mentioned, we need to work through a specific use case here. But
I get that. I think developing a couple of use cases discussed today will be really good, and I can try to do that as a comment as well.
Yeah, I've noticed that, like, we got dragged down with the discussions, which is good to talk through this to get a better understanding. It's an important architectural concept. But Ray, you want to say the last few words before we have to finalize the meeting for today?
Well, yeah, I know that we're out of time, but I do think the transparency service will need a functionality that will say, this reference, these are all of the submissions for this reference that I have, and there are no more, and there are no less, because otherwise a person who claims to be on a submitter can say, okay, this is all the information that we have about this, and we didn't do anything in the past, even though they did. So anyway, that I will include that. So that I think that I don't think we're going to be able to get around the functionality of being able to do some kind of lookups, even though we might. So I'll take a look at it and think it through some more.
Ray, are you going to post something to the mailing list? Is that what?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
I'll write it up, because I am getting closer on this use case, and I'll put the link for where I am, because there's still a few loose ends, but it's getting locked down some more. So I'm starting to understand how to use these pieces. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot for the discussion. I took some notes, and obviously there are some action items. Apparently not the end of the story, but I think we all now understand much better what you, Cedric, try to accomplish with your proposal. And thanks for the detailed write-up and for the explanations today. And we also, I think we looked into some additional use cases or more advanced use cases, which we also need to look into, which are related to this, but obviously not the same. So even more work. So we went out to solve one open issue, and we created an extra one.
Okay. And thank you for the historicity word, Hank. That's a good word. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all, and have a good Monday.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.